Iran's so-called morality police have restarted patrols in an attempt to force women to wear the headscarf. The police had largely pulled back following the death in custody of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini last year. Anti-regime protests that followed saw more than 500 people killed and nearly 20,000 arrested.
There is plenty of hair on display on the streets of Iran's capital, Tehran. While women are obliged to wear a headscarf, the young generation in particular is openly defying the rules of the Islamic Republic. Now, the authorities are hitting back.
From today, police patrols will be established throughout the country. In addition to their other duties, these police officers will deal with those who, unfortunately, ignore the consequences of not wearing the proper hijab and insist on disobeying the norms.
Iran's dreaded morality police are set to patrol the streets again in a new push to force women to wear the hijab. Despite their reputation for brutality, not everyone is willing to have their looks policed.
Do you think the morality police can prevent women from not wearing a hijab? They cannot impose it like before. The number of people who do not obey is too high now. They cannot handle all of us. The last thing they can do is use violence and force against us.
The morality police have been lying low since the death in custody of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, arrested last September for not wearing her headscarf. The incident sparked months of protest, ending in a violent crackdown that saw nearly 500 people killed and 20,000 arrested. Now that the protests have died down, Iran's conservative leaders are reasserting their authority on public life.
The daughter of an Iranian-born German man facing a death sentence in Iran fears she may have spoken to her father for the last time. Authorities allowed a phone call after previously prohibiting contact for 2 years. Jamshid Sharmahd's family says he was kidnapped by Iranian intelligence in Dubai 3 years ago and brought to Iran. He previously lived in the United States, where he was involved in an exile opposition group. Sharmahd was accused of planning an attack on a mosque and sentenced to death. His family and rights groups reject those charges. And earlier I spoke to Jamshid Sharmahd's daughter, Gazelle. She spoke to her father yesterday for the first time in 2 years. I asked her how he sounded.
Well, he sounded very, very weak. That's because he's been held in solitary confinement for over 1,000 days, being tortured, not being able to see anybody but the people who torture him and who try to get forced confessions out of him. And that breaks you. Even the strongest person breaks under these kind of pressures. He's been put through 8 sham trials, and I have to correct you, he wasn't put in court because of terrorist attacks or something. This is part of the propaganda that the regime puts out. He was tried for corruption on earth. That's a made-up charge that they give all of the dissidents, all of the people who are against the regime, who are outspoken like my dad. You don't have to commit a crime to be charged with corruption on earth or war against God. And they give you the death sentence just for speaking your mind. So we have to really correct and be careful that we don't repeat the propaganda of the regime. My father is also not an Iranian German. He is just a German citizen with a German passport, living for 40 years in Germany, 20 years in America. He only lived in Iran when he was born there and until he was 7 years old. So he is a German citizen kidnapped outside, and that's not just what the family says. That's what the UN Working Group of Arbitrary Detention says. That's what all the lawyers say. This is proven to us. So we really need to not repeat the propaganda of the regime. My dad has denied all charges, just like all of the political prisoners that are right now on death row. All of them are innocent.
Thank you there for clarifying his status to us. You said the very fact that you were allowed to be in contact with him is great cause for concern for you. Can you explain why that is?
Well, you have to imagine, like, when you speak to your dad for the first time, you're absolutely happy just to hear his voice and to know that he's alive, because we didn't have a sign of life from him since before he received the death sentence. So we didn't know if they already killed him or not. But it is a bad sign because you're talking to a regime, or this regime is allowing it. That regime has not a hint of humanity in them. That's the regime that kidnapped my dad, that tortured my dad, that's gassing schoolgirls just for being in school, that is beating up women in the street, that's shooting out the eyes of protesters, that's raping people. So why would they all of a sudden allow me to speak to my dad? There's always something behind it, why the regime does something. And because I've been very, very loud, I just went to court and sued the regime. Actually, I have a major lawsuit coming up. We've been very loud in the media. Maybe they're trying to silence me, and maybe this is a way to keep me quiet. And next week they will publish the news or not publish the news that my dad was executed. We don't know that. I just know when the regime does something like that, there's always something bad behind it, always something that they want to achieve with it. And what it is in this case, I don't know, but it can't be good news.
Now, since he is a German citizen, are German authorities in regular contact with you about his situation? And what are they doing to help?
Of course, the German government, the foreign ministry is in regular contact with me. The problem is not the contact. The problem is what's coming out of this contact. For 3 years now, when a German citizen was kidnapped and taken to Iran, the authorities have told me, your dad is German. We will do everything in our power to help him. And you're waiting and you're waiting and you hear it over and over again that they're talking on a highest level with the representatives over there. And you know that talking to a terrorist regime that terrorizes people inside and outside of Iran doesn't work. So you're waiting for that moment where you see that your government will step up and actually do something that will help you, that will help the people of Iran, that will help the citizens outside. I'm also a target right now. And this day hasn't come. When my dad got the death sentence, they kicked out 2 low-level diplomats out of Germany. That was the first action that we saw. My government hasn't even demanded the release of my dad. They haven't even demanded the release of their hostages. There are several German hostages. And that is absolutely scandalous to know that your government doesn't even ask for it. How can they get him out? How can they save his life when they're not even calling him hostage, when they're not even demanding his release? And that's something that we really, really have to work on and put pressure on our governments, because it is their first and foremost duty of every government to protect their citizens from terrorism. And when this happens and you see they're not there to do something, then something is seriously wrong with our world and with our politics with Iran.
Jamshid Sharmahd there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.